Funding for the following program has been provided by this station and other public television stations, and by a grant from the Chubb Group of Insurance Companies.
A little bit tangled here, but never mind that. Last night we started a conversation with the writer Eudora Welty, and as with all good Southern conversationalists, you want her to go on and on. So tonight, fortunately, she is here tonight to go on for a little bit more, and as I mentioned last night, she's one of our finest short story writers, also a Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist. What else? Well, if that weren't enough, I reminded us recently in a collection called The Eye of the Story that she's a very perceptive critic besides. But she reminded us, I should say. But let's get back to her. Will you welcome again Eudora Welty? Eudora, last night we closed talking about advice to writers. Is there such a thing? And you said a fascinating thing, which was that if a latent talent is there, the fact that it's latent is probably not enough, and that it should be bigger than that. If it has to be brought out, it probably won't be in some sense.
Yeah, I think it tries to push itself out, just like it is really a passion. You know, it's not just what people often say, you know, if I had your time. Oh, it's not a matter of time, because of course you have to fight for time always to do anything you really want to.
So it isn't too
It'll do it. It'll do it.
It'll come out if it's there, and if you're meant to be a writer, you will. Do you believe that? I believe you will. You
want to so badly.
Yeah, our late friend Gene Stafford once said, God put me on this earth to write fiction, and that's what I do, and that's what I am, and to pretend anything else would be foolish.
Yeah. And like what Flannery O'Connor said, you know, when someone said, why do you write? She said, because I write well.
That's a good answer.
Which was really meaning the same thing, is that it was something, it was a skill that meant everything to her to do, and that's why she did it.
Let me ask you something that's a little private, but not too much so. It might be instructive about writing. Could you take something like the death of our friend Gene Stafford, for example, who's a writer who some people thought was quietly doing among the best writing in America. Her collected short stories, Pulitzer Prize collection, and so on. A wonderful thing of hers appeared in the New Yorker this past, not too many months ago, in 1978. But she had a stroke. I remember a word you used. It is fiendish what has happened to Gene in a note I got from you. And so she, for the last couple of years, she couldn't write, could barely talk. How she survived that, I don't know. I mean, it's as remarkable as Tanaquil Leclerc, the dancer who had polio. It's that same sort of, to be stricken right in the area of your talent. Could you take something like that and use it in your fiction? Or is it too close somehow?
I don't know. That situation, I might be able to write something about. If I didn't have to remember that it was my friend Gene that went through it, I'd find it very hard to write about anything connected absolutely to a close friend or a person.
You do, yeah.
I mean, I never have used real people in stories, including myself. I have to have experienced, I do experience the emotions which I use, which are your material to write with. I don't think you can make up grief or joy or love or hate or anything. You have to know what they're like. But I like to make my stories like actors who can carry it out better than actual people that I know. You know, we go around bumbling a good deal.
Bumming?
No, bumbling.
Bumbling.
I mean, you know, most human beings have a hard time really expressing things or bringing things to a head. We don't succeed in having a dramatic solution to our troubles, and so you make up people that can do it. I mean, that's the way I work. I can only answer for myself.
Life doesn't present it neatly enough.
No.
Have you ever, though, when you say don't use real people, of course, there's in some sense...
Oh, use pieces of real people, of course.
Yeah, parts of them. And so. Have you ever had what Jean once called the disguise problem, and she had one story that was presented in real life almost totally in terms of situation that a writer needs to get a story going. And she had to set it in another part of the world and so on and so on, and still, she said this one time it happened to her, the character recognized himself and was very, very upset.
No.
Would you ever have that problem?
No, because I can't work that way and don't work that way.
Your use of fragments of people would prevent that from happening, I suppose.
Yes, and then even if you use fragments, the amalgamation of them is still just to mix some wonderful metaphors, just the jumping off place of the diving board from which you go out into the story. So these tatters and tatterdemalion ends of things that you may have put in wouldn't still be like that person.
You're known to cut a lot out, and I've read that you often will let characters go on a bit more than you know will be in the final version.
That's right.
Does this mean that mysterious thing writers talk about, that they take on a life of their own, where a writer can actually find himself saying, don't interrupt me, I've got to find out how this scene ends, I'm still writing it, and I don't know what Jake is going to do about the fire?
No, I will know what Jake's going to do about the fire, but I think a novel would lead you into those temptations more. In a short story, you're too constrained.
Yeah.
But the reason I rewrite a lot of things and write scenes and things that never appear is that I'm trying to do different ways to get to the same end. You know, I'll dramatize something one way and then I'll try it another. And as I've gone on writing over the years, I've learned a lot of ways I could do things. I used to think there was just one way, and all my early stories were just written like this, like a ribbon, because I didn't know any
Straight
better.
line.
Yeah. But now I know there are lots of different ways you could do things, and it's fun it's fascinating, and it teaches you something about what you're doing.
Yeah. Would you ever, for your own amusement, or maybe in publication, try to write in someone else's form entirely? Have you ever, for example, read a Gene Stafford story and thought, I wish I could have written that? The way some, again, actors will say, I wish I could do.
Oh, of course. I mean, there are many writers that I admire, but it doesn't occur to you to attempt to do anything someone else has done, because you can't do anything except what you know how to do.
It would just be mimicry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that would be very hard to do. In fact, I'd fail it if I tried it. If you gave me an assignment, I'd flunk.
If I asked you to write a Carson McCullers story.
No, now you're getting into, I think it would be fun to do parodies of people.
Parodies.
I do like, but that's an art too, such as Perelman or...
Yes. You do know the wonderful fact that there was a Graham Greene, sort of like a look-alike contest, there was a Graham Greene short story contest somewhere, and Graham Greene, under another name, entered it and came in second.
Yes, I did know that,
You know
and
about
that's
that?
true. That's, I mean, it's right that it should be.
That's the way it should be.
I think it
tells
is.
us something.
You don't know enough about. You have to be on the outside looking at it to really know how to parody, I think, but also be able to write pretty well.
Who was it who said used the phrase "murder your darlings"? In other words, he said, "I reread what I've written and I find what I think is my most exquisite paragraph, and I strike that right out."
Yeah, braver than I am. I leave a lot of things that ought to have been murdered in, I know.
Can you believe that any writer actually does that, or is it that he simply sees where he's getting a little fancy and strikes that out?
Well, that's a different matter.
Yeah.
I don't know. But you have to be pretty ruthless. And that's how that's the reason I work with scissors, because if you cut something out, it's gone. You can't find it and put it back in.
Do you feel you owe future generations any obligation to save those fragments?
No.
Maybe put them in a big envelope and donate them to Ole Miss or something, so that people can see what you cut out and thereby learn something about writing?
God forbid anybody ever finds anything I cut out.
Do you burn those?
Oh, yes. I don't want anyone to see even the draft before this.
So I couldn't even go through your garbage and find...
Oh, Horace, you'd be sorry.
Because to me that would be fascinating if you could find... Wouldn't you be interested to know what James Joyce took out of Ulysses, if anything?
Well, maybe I would. No, I mean, but I feel sad for people. Now the thing is to go back and find all their early drafts and put things in. And I don't think it's fair to a person. I really don't.
Oh, no, to rewrite someone else's work, in effect?
No, I mean, just
Yeah.
to publish all the little tag-ins and so on, if they've thought they've got rid of those things.
What about letters you've written to people?
Oh, I just don't want people to print anything except what I submit to a magazine. I'll be glad if they take that. Sometimes they won't print that.
Yeah.
But
Trying to think
I'm
of the...
against it. I'm against it.
You are?
Mm-hmm.
He once said in an interview, if they try to find out anything about my personal life, they won't.
I don't think
Is that
I really
because
said
you
it
have
that bluntly.
such a sordid personal life that you don't want
No,
to...
that's what it sounds like. I don't really believe I said it that bluntly, because
No.
all I meant was that I was disinclined to know it. And I think my personal life would probably bore them a lot too, but that's not the point either, whether it was boring or scandalous.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same reason I don't want it published.
And the point is that you should be judged by your work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that. You used the phrase attentive to life in talking about, I'm mixing now in my mind 2 or 3 interviews you've given, but the question was, what does a writer really do? What is a writer's work about? And you used the phrase being attentive to life, I believe, or maybe Reynolds Price used it about you, but anyway, the idea was that you report something honestly, and without a message and without a motive to instruct or answer questions or something. And I just liked the sound of that.
Thank you.
Do you still agree with all that, or have
Yes,
you changed
I do.
since then?
You're putting it better than I could have, I think, but I do mean
Well, if
I
you-
would like the work to reveal something about human life.
What if an English teacher from Chillicothe writes to you and says, our class has been reading your story, let's say, what's the name of the one? I can only think it was the one inspired by a Fats Waller concert.
Powerhouse.
Powerhouse.
Yeah.
And we liked it very much, but what does it mean? Please answer in 25 words or less.
I probably got that letter.
You probably got
You
that
mean
letter.
what would I say about Powerhouse?
Well,
do
yeah,
you
or
really
anyone who
mean
said,
this?
what does your story mean? We liked it, but what does it mean?
I get letters like that. The class is already decided is the thing. And sometimes if you reply as honestly as you can, and I do try to, you get a reply back saying, but our teacher says
But
that
you're
what
wrong.
it means is so, yeah, I'm wrong.
Is that man fails to communicate with his
That's
fellow
right.
man, for example.
Yeah. No, I mean, people are perfectly free as far as I'm concerned to think what they like, because a writer tries to suggest many things besides the literal things in his story. That's what you try to do. But I feel that having done that, I've done all I need to do. I don't have to agree with them, do I?
No. By the way, should we strike a blow for all writers now? If you're a student and you're watching, and if you're quite young, in fact, please do not write to famous writers and say, please send me the names of all the things you have written. You do get those occasionally.
Yes, I do, but I am pleased to have students read my work, and I'm
Yeah.
ashamed. If there's anybody out there whose letter I have not answered, I'm sorry, because I would like to, because I appreciate it, but some of the questions are impossible to deal with, and some are not worth dealing with.
Of course.
You know,
And
like,
you're-
tell me the name of your last book.
Tell me the name of your last book.
Well, they
Yeah.
could find it, you know, if they had to.
Presumably there's a library nearby.
I don't get too many like that.
Our friend Gene Stafford, as you know, had an extremely wicked tongue and mind at times that was hilarious. And I saw a letter once. I don't guess this is revealing of confidence. It was a letter she wrote in answer to one of those letters, and it was from some really impossible English teacher somewhere in America who had written, and I think the very thing had happened that you said. She was not satisfied with Gene's answer and said, don't you realize that what your story is really about?
Yeah.
And I have told my students this, and that such and such was a symbol of something, and
Right.
Jean made that yeah sound, you know, when she was angry. And she showed me a letter she wrote back to the woman, which contained the line, you should not be teaching English to young students. You should be working in the stylish stout section of J.C. Penney.
The teacher would just think that was symbolic.
Yeah. She would find symbols in that and not see any, you know.
I guess it was symbolic.
She also had a kind side and did not mail that letter, but she gave it to me instead.
Yeah.
I think that's marvelous. You know, you said something quite interesting. This is getting a little technical, but the typewriter versus handwriting in writing. And you said that you have, when you see it in typing, it's suddenly another thing.
Mm-hmm.
And some writers can only write by hand and never see that until, I guess, the point of galleys or proofs. Mm-hmm. And you say that even when you see your writing in proofs, it's a shock. And you have said, I didn't write this. And you had to call at once up and say, would you be sure and check and see if you've printed what I wrote? What's that all about?
I think it's probably because I had so many jobs on newspapers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and when you write something, you can look. I learned that. What a good thing it was to see something in cold type looking back at me.
Yeah.
I often write to begin with in longhand, but I transcribe it almost immediately before I go any further. So
and you get a different impression of reading it the next day.
It talks back to me, you know, and says, what do you mean? You know, you didn't get this clear. And if you look at it, it's also compact on the page, and it's, I find it very helpful. But you know, no two writers are the same.
True. Some can only write in crayon or standing up or on a breadboard or whatever.
Yeah.
Did you like William Faulkner?
Mm-hmm. Very much.
How well did you know him?
Personally, you mean?
Yeah.
I knew him a little bit up to fairly well over a long period. You know, never closely.
Mm-hmm.
We never passed two words about writing.
What would he tend to talk about? Did you ever go over to Oxford and share a glass with him?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was nice. You know, I just would see him like at a dinner party or something. Mm-hmm. We talked about the other people in Oxford. You know, tales, tall tales, the same kind of thing we were talking about. He was a wonderful tale teller.
Can you remember a tale Faulkner told you?
Oh, no, I wish I could.
Yeah.
I wish I could. I mean, I can remember them, but I couldn't do it.
Do you make notes of things like that and then put them away, or is that his property?
Well, everything's his property because I used to take the Oxford Eagle, the funniest newspaper that ever was printed, and I could have used a million things out of that, but I figured that was his territory.
What was funny about it?
It had wonderful names and wonderful people writing in from the little country roads outside. They used to write their own column, like the Paris letter. Paris, Mississippi.
Paris, Mississippi?
Ms. So-and-so lost all of her preserves last week when it froze and they all blew up. You know, head off.
Would that be on the front page?
That
would be in the Paris letter?
It would be the first item in his column for that week. Maybe the biggest thing that had happened.
Yeah.
And there was also one about Mr. and Ms. So-and-so was shot as they returned from church last Sunday.
That's all the information?
Yeah, I guess everybody else knew what happened next. But you know, they're just full of all kinds of provocative things, but I figured they belonged to Bill Faulkner.
By the way, when you say Mr. and Ms., you're not saying M.S. period, are you?
I'm not. I'm saying M-I-Z, I guess.
Which is Mrs.
Miseries.
Yeah.
When you're being very sarcastic.
Oh, how would you do that?
Miseries.
Miseries for Mrs.
Miseries. I think it comes from mistress, do you suppose?
It does. It sounds a little like mistress, and it looks a little like M-R-S.
I don't know, but that's when you're being, I've heard this. This is a country way of talking.
So, well, how would you use that in a complete sentence?
Well, miseries, Fletcher. So this is what you want me to do, is it? You know, sarcastic and insulting.
Oh, there's so many wonderful notes in Southern speech and melodies, and each that, some of which I guess you must lose on the page, don't you? But
yes,
you
do.
Supply it in hearing it. When we heard you read that last night, it was wonderful.
Faulkner taught me a lot about how you could suggest by reading him, about how you could suggest speech suggest cadences and rhythms and where people breathe in a sentence by the use of his words and his punctuation. He didn't have to spell things in a funny way, you know.
Yeah,
he did it all with suggestion.
It wasn't phonetic spelling, though, was it?
No,
It was
phonetic spelling.
Because that drives you crazy if there's yows and eyes gwines and things.
But he did it.
Yeah. Would you read a little something? I'm so enchanted by your reading and so enchanted by your conversation that this is a terribly hard choice to have to make, but since some people might have missed hearing you read last night, Would you do a little bit from Powerhouse for us tonight? That's such a remarkable story.
All right, I'll try to.
I'll help you find it. Or do you have it marked?
No, but...
Give me a moment here while we...
there's two books in
while
one.
I live at the PO. I know that it's. I know that it's in the other one.
Yes, sir.
Shall I look toward the center?
We could look in the index.
Yes, that's what the student who writes it. Why is it I always feel I can find a thing quicker?
Here it is. This is Powerhouse.
I always wondered what an index was for. There you are. That's not perhaps the page you're looking for.
Well, this is all right. Well, this is a story that I wrote way back in, I guess the late 30s, after Fats Waller had played a concert in my hometown of Jackson, Mississippi. I had no idea I was going to write a story about this. It wasn't about him. It was what his music made me think of when I got home. I wrote it all night in my ignorance. And I knew I could never do it afterwards, even to correct it. And this is one little part in here that tells about how they play. The man at the piano is... Wait a minute, I don't want to read that. I don't want to read that.
I opened it right in the middle for you, unfortunately.
I think right at the beginning.
I love that part at the beginning where you're describing the...
Where he sits down at the piano?
Yeah.
Why not this part?
Yes, and there's the first page, of course, but sure.
Well, this is you just want a little piece, don't you?
As much as I can get.
Powerhouse has as much as possible done by signals. Everybody, laughing as if to hide a weakness, will sooner or later hand him up a written request. Powerhouse reads each one, studying with a secret face. That is a face which looks like a mask, anybody's. There's a moment when he makes a decision. Then a light slides under his eyelids and he says, 92 or some combination of figures, never a name. Before a number, the band is all frantic, misbehaving, pushing like children in a schoolroom, and he's the teacher getting silence. His hands over the keys, he says sternly, "You all ready? You all ready to do some serious walking?" Waits, then stamp, quiet. Stamp for the second time. This is absolute. Then a set of rhythmic kicks against the floor to communicate the tempo. Then, oh Lord, say the distended eyes from beyond the boundary of the trumpets, hello and goodbye, and they are all down the first note like a waterfall. This note marks the end of any known discipline. Powerhouse seems to abandon them all. He himself seems lost, down in the song, yelling up like somebody in a whirlpool, not guiding them, hailing them only. But he knows, really. He cries out, but he must know exactly. Mercy, what I say, yeah. And then drifting, listening, where that skin beater, wanting drums, and starting up and pouring it out in the greatest delight and brutality. On the sweet pieces, such a leer for everybody. He looks down so benevolently upon all our faces and whispers the lyrics to us. And if you could hear him at this moment on Marie, the Dawn is Breaking, he's going up the keyboard with a few fingers in some very derogatory triplet routine. He gets higher and higher, and then he looks over the end of the piano as if over a cliff, but not in a show-off way. The song makes him do it. He loves the way they all play, too, all those next to him. The fall section of the band is all studious, wearing glasses, everyone, they don't count. Only those playing around Powerhouse are the real ones. He has a bass fiddler from Vicksburg, black as pitch, named Valentine, who plays with his eyes shut and talking to himself, very young. Powerhouse has to keep encouraging him. Go on, give it up, bring it on out there. When you heard him like that on records, did you know he was really pleading? He calls Valentine out to take a solo. What you gonna play? Powerhouse looks out kindly from behind the piano. He opens his mouth and shows his tongue, listening. Valentine looks down, drawing against his instrument, and says without a lip movement, "Honeysuckle Rose." He has a clarinet player named Little Brother and loves to listen to anything he does. He'll smile and say, "Beautiful." Little Brother takes a step forward when he plays and stands at the very front with the whites of his eyes like fishes swimming. Once when he played a low note, Powerhouse muttered in dirty praise. He went clear downstairs to get that one.
That's marvelous. Yeah.
Thank you.
That was Fats Waller.
Yeah.
But would you say that it also wasn't Fats Waller, but was
It wasn't
more
about
people?
him. It was about his music. But of course,
Yeah.
I based it just on Fats playing the music.
Yeah. I suppose that story would be taught in class as an example of description as opposed to dialogue or whatever. But
Well,
it's,
yeah, what I was really writing about, I had very strange letters about that it was a race story.
Race?
Race story. It's about the artist, really.
Yeah.
An artist who a performing artist traveling, passing through, bringing something to people, giving too much of himself, they feel. There's a line in there about when somebody, no matter who, comes, he would give everything he's got to an audience of one, that it makes you almost ashamed for him. It's about the artist in his life and passing through.
When Medgar Evers was shot, not too long after that, you wrote a piece in the New Yorker, a fiction piece. Was that written out of anger?
Yeah, it was written that night.
What?
It was written that night, right after the murder. I never did do anything like that before. I was terribly upset, and so I wrote this story. I thought so much has been written about the Troubles in those days and about Southerners, but written by somebody that didn't know what the Southerners were like. And I thought I'm in a position of almost being able to tell what that man, who was unknown at the time, what he was thinking, what he was like. I believe I could get inside that murderer just because I've lived all my life here, and I was so horrified. So I attempted to do it in the first person, of course imaginary, because I didn't know who the man was.
But in another sense,
But
you
I
knew
knew
who
that,
he was.
in a sense, I knew the kind of person that it was and the kind of mind that would think that. How I did such a daring thing, I don't know, but I was carried away. I wrote it that night, and I mailed it the next day.
And it was, what was the name of it?
It's a bad title. Where is the voice coming from? Because see, I didn't know from whom.
I think you had him yell out before he was fired or something, did you? Or was that why they have the title? No.
No, there wasn't any reason for
No.
that title. I don't know. It's not a good one.
Anyway, well, that's quite a remarkable story, and it's the story of the story. Miss Eudora, we're cut off by time. I'm sorry, Eudora, we're cut off by time, and it's just been a wonderful pleasure to have you here. And
Thank you. It's a
I like the
pleasure
fact
to me.
that your writing often is positive in the sense that is often looked down on as therefore not significant. You know what I mean?
Thank you. See.
Wonderful. I wish we'd had time to talk about that. Anyway, thank you, and please come back sometime. Eudora Welty.
Thank you, Dick.
Okay.
I really enjoyed it.
Funding for the Dick Cavett Show has been provided by this station and other public television stations, and by a grant from the Chubb Group of insurance companies.